Hey everyone, so we're back again with Silent Hill, and I guess the last video was also Silent Hill on the channel, but I've been off playing Resident Evil 9, trying to finish that up so that I can do my assessment of that, because I've just realised it's been almost a month, if not a little bit more than a month since it came out. Came out on the 22nd, I believe. So yeah, it's been just over a month since it came out, and I still haven't finished it, which is kind of strange. But I have to sort of start organising my time a little better going forward, because YouTube has took up a lot of time this month. But again, like I said, I'm going to do a separate video on that. I just feel like going back to Silent Hill and playing a little bit of this, getting another episode up. So let's continue where we left off. So we're now back in the village, and we're going to Shu's house, and they're going to try and take the path through the mountains to get out of the village here. So first of all, with the rip sleeve, I like how it's a simple way for the designers to show that even though we're in the same place, so visually the setting is the same, we are now in a different segment of the game. It gives this segment of the game a different feel, and it's also a little bit of seeding for things that happen later on. There may be some more significance that I'm unaware of, but at least that's my read on the situation. We notice that it's her right hand that is sort of exposed, and like I said, I do think this is more of a seeding for things that happen later on rather than something allegorical.
大丈夫か、相棒。化け物につけられてないか。
問題ない。シュウ君っていつまでひな子のこと相棒って呼ぶの？相棒なんて呼び方、小学生の男子みたい。
相棒は相棒さ。俺は相棒を女扱いしてない。
そうだな。された覚えもない。
So this is very typical of how women do battle, right? They speak something that on the surface is one thing, but on another they try and remove power by saying that she's treated like a schoolboy. They remove the power that she's not feminine or not a woman, or it's a very negative connotation, and this is what I found, and I think this is what the game is showing. This is how women traditionally tend to do battle, and modern discourse is likely to say, oh, this, that, and the other, but nah, you're completely wrong. Like for the majority of people in the majority of the world, that's how it is. Historically, it's known that poison is the weapon of a woman. That is like the historic normal, and it's for a reason, because that is how they operate. And this is another thing that you have to realize as well, that with equality, and I do believe in equality, and I believe in equality for what it is, equal, but with equality and a lot of women getting roles in higher positions, this is how they tend to manage as well. And this is why you'll find that a lot of PR roles, marketing, HR, they tend to be female oriented. They are the master of the takedown. And because of modern society, like this is actually thematic to this game, but because of modern society, men are also now like that, because they're being brought up in households of women. So I'm going to try and just walk past this one. I don't think we need to do battle where it's unnecessary. We've been down there before. You know, and even the symbolism in the fact that, you know, this is an organism, but on one side we've got the beautiful red spider lilies, and then in the same organism this gross, you know, organic, it's disgusting, right? And we've got that side of things. You know, when people talk about patriarchal systems, such as the ones being tackled in this game, it's often, if not always, in the negative. But I do believe that there is a lot of merit in a patriarchal system. I think that to look at them as purely as negative is wrong. Am I saying that women had the long straw in history? No, I think that oftentimes women have drawn the short straw. But that doesn't take away credence from the efforts of men. And like I said, what people don't understand is, first of all, her father would have been fresh out of World War II. Second of all, he would have been forced into a job that he has no clue about. He probably very, very likely came from, you know, a agricultural background before the war. After the war, you know, firstly, we don't know how mentally and physically her father would have been injured by that. And secondly, he then goes into industrial or civil engineering efforts that destroy his own land, destroy his body. You know, at the end of the day, he's returning fatigued, a little bit poisoned by toxic elements, and that's cumulative as well. You have to remember. So I have to be the one to pull the veil away from, you know. Like I said, did women draw the short straw? Most definitely, and even in places like Korea, it's still abundant, you know. But I don't believe that turns, you know, a patriarchal society necessarily into a negative. I believe that, and this is crazy coming from a country where the Prime Minister is a very strong woman, but I believe that for the majority, Japan is still a patriarchy. We've looked in there previously, and this is the doctor's house. So you would expect the doctor's house to be a little bit more impressive than everywhere else. But as you can see, in a socialist society such as Japan, that's not the case. I'm not saying his house is terrible, but it's no better, no worse than anyone else's. Maybe slightly bigger for someone who's an individual, but you know, this is where, like, I honestly don't believe that there is really, the problem isn't so clean cut as it's a gender problem, or it has been a gender problem in those certain situations. You know, when we're talking from sort of the 60s to the 90s, even into the early 2000s. Can't talk about now because it's flipped. I don't think it's a gender problem per se. I think it's a class problem, because I think that upper middle class women do not face the issues that middle class, definitely working class and lower class men face. You know, so it's not as clean cut as just saying, you know, women have it worse, because you cannot say that, you know, like an upper middle class woman who, yes, doesn't have the right to vote, yes, doesn't really get to choose what she wears or where she goes, but how can you compare that to, say, a lower class man who works in a coal mine all his life with, you know, toxic substances and soot getting into his lungs, who doesn't get the choice of where he goes or what he wears? He goes down a mine and he stays there all day. Like, I think that there's a little bit of blindness to this conversation. I think it's very one-sided, and I think that You know, like I said, I'm not taking away from the struggles of women,
相棒
but I think that it's an audacity to take away from the struggles of
お前の
men.
宇宙戦争だって妙な宇宙人がどんどん増えてっただろうが。
ひなこってしゅうくんと話すときは男の子みたいな喋り方
And here we have it again. So she's just trying to
昔の癖が今も抜けないからかな。
俺たちは幼い頃からの付き合いだからな
trying to deconstruct the relationship or frame their relationship in the way that she wants it to be. You know, she's saying you're friends. He doesn't look at you as a woman. He's not interested in you. Which, first of all, he certainly does, right? We can definitely tell that. He certainly wants a little more out of this relationship than Hinako wants to give. But at the same time, you have to think, is that what Hinako's even interested in? Like, this girl who's supposedly her friend is sort of like belittling her for something that she doesn't even want. You know, she's like, that's the relationship she wants with Shu, as far as I can tell. And then this woman comes in and, this girl comes in and is belittling her for it. Which again is a small town thing, and it's not just, it's a small town thing that's crept into life in general. It also goes towards that class divide that I'm talking about. It's a keeping your lane even when you know your lane is like over there. And people, like, there's a I forget the exact quote, but it's from Robin Hobb, Assassin's Apprentice, I think the first one. Is it no, it would have been the third one. My apologies, in the third one. And they're talking about Regal, who, this is on a totally different tangent here. But basically, if I remember rightly, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Shade who said to Fitz, the main character, he says that you can't measure someone else by your own bushel, which is the equivalent of saying that like my measurements and their measurements aren't the same. And I think that this is the perfect example of that, where Hinako, her measurement is one thing, and then we've got is it Sakuko? Rinko, right? And then we've got Rinko, who's measuring it by a totally different measurement and trying to compare the two. And it's apples to oranges. And then you've got Shu, who is kind of stuck in the middle, right? So let's try and ditch the baseball bat. Let's get that. Let's ditch the iron pipe, because I do like the sickle. The sickle favors the brave. It's a very fast, low cost weapon to use. And then this again goes into that. Let's talk less about class and more about gender, where clearly, you're talking about Showa era Japan, where gendered roles were very much a thing. And I wonder if I can just sneak past them all. Another bandage. Let's see if I can just sneak past them all. Where, uh-oh. Oh. Right, I know where I'm going now, I think. But as I was saying, gender roles were very much a thing. Women were expected to be women. Women were expected to be housekeepers. Right, so I can't go here. So the lamp lied to me, did it? No, there must be a way through something. Wait there a moment. Here we are. So I'm safe here for the moment. So as I said, women were very much expected to be, you know, the traditional female role. Hinako obviously doesn't want that at all, which is where a lot of her strife, internal strife, comes from. You know, she even looks at, especially her mother, who, you know, accepts this lying down, accepts the abuse, the verbal abuse, maybe even physical abuse from her father, and she looks at her with, you know, as though she's the lowest thing for doing it. And then we've also got her sister, who she sort of admires, but then her sister has done the exact same thing as her mother. You know, she's got out of this family just to trade places to be the same thing in another family, which is why you never see her with a face. That's why she's always faceless, because she feels like, yeah, she's out of this family, but she sold her own identity to do it, which is why Hinako is obviously pushing against that. She doesn't want to do the same, but then when she sees Mr. Foxmask, she kind of does exactly the same thing, right? I'm not going to pick that up. Let's keep going. And this is why I like video games, because, you know, anyone can turn this on and anyone can say, wow, that mannequin doll is creepy, or look at those spider lilies, and enjoy the game. But at the same time, you can also actually engage with it and engage with the creator and the creator's themes, or even the creator's questions. And you don't always, you know, that's the thing, like a lot of musicians, you know, they will write something that is completely personal, but at the same time they will allow it to be interpreted however they wish. And I think the media is very much the same. Your experiences, your individual experiences are going to contribute to how you take a game like this. Okay, so now they're choosing to go through the school, which is obviously a play from the creator to bridge the narrative so that they can see where these experiences are being made, and that sort of turned Hinako into the person she is, and Rinko and Sakuko. And I think in this kind of scenario, like, Shu has it difficult as well, because, you know, even though his life is traditionally more straightforward, what he wants is unavailable to him, right? He wants Hinako, but he doesn't, I don't feel like he wants Hinako to, you know, dress up as housewife, right? He wants, she's his partner, which is a very modern day thing. I think that, you know, if they had grown up during the 90s or early 2000s, that relationship would likely have bloomed, wouldn't it? I think that's the takeaway there. But because, you know, everything was so defined back then, there was far less, you know, Hinako saw that as a gilded cage of its own. Maybe even without the gilding, maybe just a straight up cage. Whereas perhaps she saw Foxmask more as the gilded cage. But the truth of the matter is, Foxmask offered closer to what her father did with niceties than Shu did. Like, I think that in comparison, Shu would have offered her something radical, whereas Fox Mask doesn't. He just does it. You know, it's the same thing, just gilded. I'm gonna fight this one because I don't really know the area, and we're gonna have to do a little bit of exploring. Oh, I can't do anything when they grab me, right? Let me just destroy this one a moment. Okay. So these don't come back if I remember rightly. But I do have to... Okay, so I've got a surfeit of bandages at the moment. But there is one that sort of allows it to come back over time if I remember rightly. Kudzu tea, that's it. Okay, so let's use the kudzu tea, I think. Because that's no use in battle. But here it's very useful. We'll just stay a little bit out of trouble. So this is about to be broken. That's okay, that's fine. And you know, like, growing up in Thailand in the 90s, houses were like this then. Like, I can't speak for... Like, I think that the same in Japan. I think in rural Japan, many people my age would have grown up very similar to this. I don't think we're that separated. I think that the generation that followed us, you know, sort of... What is it? Gen Z, right? And I don't know what the... Like, the difference between me and my brother was born in 2000, and the life he lived is completely, totally different to mine. Like, he didn't experience any of this. You know, I grew up in rice fields and the Welsh mountains and knee-deep in mud, digging foxholes and, you know, making crossbows and stuff. Like, my brother grew up in his bedroom, and... Like, there needs to be some sort of sympathy there, not for my brother, but for the generation as a whole. Because now people would look at this and look at, oh, look, but the floor is dirty and the house is made of wood and they're using tin slats on the roof. It's like, and they look at that and they see poverty because that's what the modern regime has forced us to, you know, if it's not beautifully painted and the floor is not toxic to life. And everything grey concrete, it's primitive. But I believe it's the opposite. I think there's nothing more primitive than having ground that, you know, is dead, basically. What can you do on concrete? Concrete was made for rubber tires, not for humans. You know, and... But it's also... I think that the modern world is the biggest drug. I think that we're all addicted to it. I have land. Like, could I go back to planting rice and stuff? Not for a moment, could I? I think if I had to, it would be a very, very hard transition. But I'm also not calling for... Let's eat those arares. Just to get my health up and to sort of get them out of my inventory. But you know, everything I'm talking about, this is like everything that I do in my photography. You can go check out my website, drobertsphoto.com, and you'll see like everything. I just did it's almost 6 months ago now, but I did a interview with Jen, who owns, her father owns Udon Organic Farm, and talk about all this sort of stuff over there. You can read that and sort of, you know, and I don't want to call it jealousy, but you know, part of me kind of strives for that, but I know that's not my habitat. And I'm not trying to say that everyone should go back to agricultural means. I'm not, you know, one of those kind of people. Like, I fully admit that I think that, you know, a lot of what is around is very good compared to before, number one. And number two, I just don't think it's possible, but I do think that some sort of middle ground is possible. And I think that, like, a lot of things, like money is very important. Otherwise, how would we have such a universal measure in this world if we didn't have something like money? But at the same time, it's not the only measure, right? Like, it should be the measure. Like, it should follow quality. It should follow... But it doesn't. It's sort of... It's the snake that eats its own tail. It follows itself. And that's when you start getting the human element, where people start doing heinous things. And it is heinous, you know, because, like, to these corporations, a person's life is a line item. But that's a person's life, you know. When someone says they're shutting down, let's just keep it to games, they're shutting down a studio or doing layoffs, right? It's not just that person. It's that person's partner. It's that person's child. It's that person's livelihood. Perhaps there's a knock-on effect, so that when that person no longer has a job, he no longer buys the things he usually buys. So the person who's making that item then gets laid off because sales are not up. Maybe the guy has a cleaner or a gardener, you know, because he's working full time and doesn't have time to look after his property. Well, perhaps they no longer have a job, and because they no longer have the job, they no longer can spend, which means even more people and even more sectors get hit by these reduced sales, and then they get laid off, and it's wholesale. And I think that that's the problem when you start looking at things from, you know, a corporate perspective and not a human perspective. And I think that especially in things like games, which are art, right? What's a game? Narrative. That's traditional literature, art. Literal art, asset creation and visuals. That's literally an art. It's also got motion, so that taps into cinema. Definitively art. Music, scoring, soundtracks, art. Acting, considered an art. Everything that makes up a game is considered art. So how do you categorize that? Like what measure do you measure that at? And I think that that's where, like, a lot of people fail, because sometimes it's like money will follow a good product every time. But how do you define that? I think there needs to be someone who says, you know what, this is something that's worth having in this world, and you have to say that before anything else, right? Let's have a little look at this. Son, you better read this and get it through your thick head. Let me take you back to something that happened during the war. As I said, one day some high and mighty military police from out of town got pissed drunk and decided to kick over a statue of Inari-sama, even spat on it. The next morning, all those policemen were found dead in the waterway, their corpses bloated and heavy as hell. So this is literal allegory here, you know, when you stop respecting the kami, when you stop respecting the rural, agricultural, the natural, this is what happens. And this is the through line of this game, certainly. They got carted off to the medical examiner's office so the coroner could take a look. You know that place a few minutes from us. We'd just been there, right? I was one of the people who helped carry the bodies and wash them, so I saw everything with my own two eyes. When that doctor put his knife to their bellies and opened them up, a whole swamp of stomach-churning gunk came pouring out. And I don't mean their guts either. From neck to navel, hell, even right up their asses. Those bodies were stuffed full of decomposing rats, birds, frogs, snakes, you name it. And that look of frozen terror on their faces, I'll never forget that. Anyway, moral of the story is you better not ever disrespect Inari-sama in that way, even if you're drunk. So yeah, I mean, this is... But at the same time, you know, these sort of thoughts and these things, even them would have been considered primitive You know, if someone was coming from Tokyo proper, they would consider this lifestyle primitive even back then. Definitely now. But as I said in the other video, it's the ultimate luxury, isn't it? But the reason it's been killed, and you know, like I said, this is the whole thesis of all my documentary work, is that you can't be a subsistence farmer anymore because you still have to pay taxes. You have bills to pay now. Before you didn't. You know, before everything got automated and everything got chalked up, someone had to literally come out and talk to you, and what would they get? A bag of grain, a bag of rice, because that's all you had, you know. But now you're forced to destroy the soil by making surplus and taking it to market. But again, I won't get into that, but it is a through line of all Japanese works, and it's a major component as to everything I do, and that will go into video games as well. You can bet your bottom dollar on it. You know, there's a reason that Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game. Anyway, I think that we've tackled a lot of heavy subjects today, perhaps far heavier than you're used to seeing on a YouTube game walkthrough. But like I said, I did the wrong one. Oh well, that's not a problem. I can live with that. Let me just save the game. So I don't know how long we've been playing today. It's only been a short one, but I think there's been a heavy one. And like I was saying, a lot of these games here, what you draw from them directly reflects on your personal experiences as much as it does the creators. But if you create enough, you know, with like a big enough palette, people will be able to mix their own colors. But if you make something with a small narrative palette, then it is just what it is. But I think that I'm very close to home on this. I don't think this is a personal interpretation. I think that I am very, very close to home. So, as we always say here, this is Banshee Interactive. I'm David Roberts. And remember, this is not a simulation.